Good afternoon, everyone. On our agenda this afternoon are reports from the Conference Board and the Processor Advisory Board, and we'll revisit regulatory proposals. Before we get to those, though, we're going to have a little bit of additional information on the Fishery Independent Setline Survey, just to clarify some issues. So if our presenters could come up, please.
So I guess I'll just go through these slides and see what questions follow. Maybe. This is some additional information, partly an answer to some questions that we've had during the week on how we would implement two of the efficiencies that we're adding to the FIS this year. The first being the use of pink salmon baits together with chum salmon baits, and the second, the use of vessel captain sets or stations. So for the 2024 FIS baits, we've already noted that 50% of the FIS sets will use chum salmon and 50% will use pink salmon. Using pink salmon on half of the 2024 stations will provide some savings on costs compared to using 100% chum baits. We've already spent money on baits, and then the pink salmon baits are less expensive than the chum baits on average. Based on past bait comparison work, though, the revenue implications of using pink salmon are not clear. We'll find out when we do the work. As far as how these baits are assigned to stations, well, each station is going to be assigned a bait type in advance. This is of particular interest to those who are involved in the bid process. Baits are assigned based on the station number to ensure that both baits are spread throughout each charter region. So we're not getting big clumps of one bait, big clumps of another bait. This allows us to estimate within model bait calibration that is not confounded by factors such as vessel, depth, habitat type, weather, and environmental variables. And so that's probably not that easy to see from the back, but I understand these might be made available. Wait for that to go by.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, Ray. Just for everybody who does have access to the website at the moment, the PowerPoint has been published as a second PowerPoint to paper 13. So if you can't read it on screen, you can get it from the meeting page. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wasn't sure if it had been put up yet. So this map shows, using the assignment that I mentioned in the previous slide, the stations that are going to use chum salmon in orange and pink salmon in that purple color. So you can see they're mixed up throughout each of the charter regions, each of the regulatory areas in which we plan or potentially are going to undertake sampling in 2024. Regarding vessel captain stations in 2024, these are planned for regulatory areas 2B and 2C only. When fishing 3 or more stations per day, vessel captains can choose to switch out a FIS station for one set located off the grid that has a higher expected catch rate. As well as potentially increasing revenue, running time between sets may be reducing potentially costs, and hopefully that'll be factored into the bids. This replacement set cannot be an assigned FIS station, but should fall in a location nearby FIS stations, but not within 3 nautical miles of another station, which is part of our standard operations. And vessel captains must get approval as to which FIS stations can be replaced, and only one off-the-grid set can be fished each day. Vessel captains must submit planned replace stations and their cruise plans prior to the 2024 FIS. So these will all be developed in advance. Weight per unit effort and numbers per unit effort indices will still be calculated based on predictions at all FIS station locations, whether they were fished or not. And by FIS station locations, I mean the stations on the grid in the map that you saw a couple of slides back. As a one-year measure, this is not expected to introduce bias in the estimates, as unfished station values most highly correlated with values obtained in the previous year. In most areas, we have something like a 95% correlation between station values through time, one year to the next. But as a check, models we fitted with and without the data from the vessel captain stations to see if inclusion of those data does have an effect on the estimates. However, the risk of bias is expected to increase with time as we're not sampling those lower catch rate stations as with the same frequency. Then we might expect that information to be more influenced by the stations we are fishing relative to past information. And so this efficiency in the design is not recommended beyond 2024. So just to illustrate what we presented in these slides perhaps a little more clearly, this is a hypothetical fishing day with 4 assigned fish grid stations that would be fished in one fishing day. Those show the location. The black spots show the location of those stations on the FIS grid. However, each of those stations has an underlying density that's different, and some stations have higher density than others. As we can see, the bottom left station is the lowest density, the upper right station has the highest density. So a vessel captain would presumably take this into account when deciding whether to do a vessel captain station or not and where to locate that vessel captain set. So in this case, the vessel captain plans to fish the 3 stations with highest expected catch rates in orange and not fish the 4th station in lower left. The 4th set, the vessel captain set, is made at a location that has a high expected catch rate, quite possibly closer to the stations that would be expected to have higher catch rates anyway, but the captain has the discretion to use their knowledge of where's a good place to fish in the vicinity of these stations. So there it is, the vessel captain set located there in this hypothetical fishing day. However, the space-time modeling will use all of the data, but will only make predictions at the FIS grid stations, both the fish stations and the unfished stations in 2024. So we'll be making our predictions at the stations, the original stations that are circled in this figure. We're not going to be making a prediction at the vessel captain station. That data will still provide some information on underlying density, and with the usefulness of information depends on how far away the stations are. So the station in upper right will benefit more from that information than the station at lower left. But we are predicting at the original FIS grid stations. This is what we do every year. This is not something completely new. And the vessel captain stations is something that's only happened once in 1993. But we often get stations that are missed because they're ineffective, or because they were not part of the sampling design in a given year. But we still predict at those stations whether they're fished or not. And this is what we continue to do in the instance of vessel captains deciding to place one set out of 3 or 4 in a different location. So hopefully that clarifies our intentions and how this is expected to proceed this year. I'm happy to take further questions. We all are happy to take further questions.
All right, thank you, Ray. Commissioners, any questions about that? Neil?
Thank you, Dr. Webster. I thought these slides were really helpful. I wondered if you could just expand maybe a bit on the bait part, and maybe just tell us a bit more about, I think in particular, how the calibration works, where we're using pink and would have previously used chum. And also, I know that we have in the past done some bait comparison studies. I think there were also some questions about, do we think those are still relevant and will we be drawing on those, or are we really just going to be doing the calibration with the new data that we have?
Okay. So for the first question, thank you, Commissioner Davis. For the first question, within the space-time model, as we've done for the SNAP and fixed year comparison, we'll add a parameter that is essentially allowing for the difference in catch rates between the two baits. So there'll be an estimated parameter in the model, and from that we can estimate for example, the ratio in catch rates of those two baits. So that parameter will be estimated in the model. Then when we come to make the predictions, we'll make a prediction as if each station had been fished with fixed gear only. So essentially, for the stations that only used, I'm sorry, I'm mixing my things up, that had only been fished using chum salmon. So for the stations that are using pink salmon, we'll be predicting as if they had been fished with chum salmon. So within that prediction, there's essentially a built-in adjustment for the bait that was used. So everything will be estimated as if it was using the bait that we've used historically, chum salmon. And that'll allow us to get a consistent estimate while giving us a within model estimate of the calibration between the two baits. Hopefully that helps. And is that
It does help, thank you. And then is there anything that you would like to say about the role of previous bait studies?
We don't have plans to integrate that information into the modeling, or I don't have plans to integrate that information in the modeling for one important reason, in that while they were designed to get a good contrast between the baits, particularly the 2012 study, which was a coast-wide study, which included pink salmon and pollock as alternative baits to chum salmon, they only used one skate per set for each bait. Chum had 4 skates. When I did the comparison back in 2012, I only used the first 50 hooks and the last 50 hooks of the chum salmon. So essentially one skate for a more equivalent comparison with the other baits, but they only use one skate per bait. And we have a minimum of 4 skates set per bait, per station that we use currently for the data that goes in, for the data that we analyze. So we have a 4 skate minimum. That didn't meet that minimum in 2012. Likewise, the bait study that was recently completed used 3 skates per bait. So while those data won't be integrated into the space-time modeling, they do provide some estimates that we can compare with what we get from the space-time model. So we'll be reassured if we get something consistent. But if we don't get something consistent, there's many reasons that may have happened. It could have simply been different environmental conditions compared to 2012, different bait preferences at the halibut, depending on what prey species are available that particular year. There's a number of factors that may explain those differences, but it's something that we'll be looking at in trying to interpret the results from this year as well.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Webster. I guess my question is just around why the need to do this. And so I guess, is it the long-term goal to see the feasibility of converting from chum to pink salmon and seeing if there is a way to quantify that? And I assume that's for cost savings, but I'll let you answer.
It's for cost savings, yes. We were asked to look at a number of options for reducing costs on the FIS last year, and the vessel captain stations and the alternative bait were 2 of the more feasible options that we considered. So whether or not we pursue this in the future, it's good to have that option in our pocket and to know that that's something we can, for in particular for the bait. As I noted, we don't recommend using the vessel captain's stations in more than 1 year, but for the bait comparison, it's good to know that this is something that's available to us in the future, that we can use those baits while making it, while accounting for the potential bait differences within the model. And there's the potential for cost savings down the line, depending on the relative prices of chum and pink salmon, but also depending on the relative catch rates we get once we undertake this work. So the motivation was well, providing more options for the survey going forwards, but basically cost savings.
So this is a broader test for a comparison study.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. One last question was in regards to approval on the skipper sets. Is there a reason why they would have to seek approval prior? Are you worried about certain biases or not? Or just maybe explain on the rationale for having to have them approved.
Okay, I think my colleagues might be able to answer that in more detail, but one thing we want to ensure is that it meets the criteria that we've set for valid placement of these sets. So for example, in particular, we want to be sure that the intended locations are outside of the 3 nautical mile range of the sets that already exist. Are there any other? Yeah, I mean, that's the main one. So knowing that in advance reduces the chance that something happens unexpected on the day or without intention on the day, which has happened before as part of the regular survey. Infrequently, our skippers are very diligent, but this having a plan in advance will help ensure that things are proceeding according to our survey requirements.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Webster.
Commissioners, any other questions? Not seeing any. Okay, thanks to the team for clarifying that. There were, I know, a number of questions from stakeholders around skipper stations and debate differences and how that would be handled. We're not having a formal public question and answer session here, but I'd encourage folks in the audience, if you have any follow-up questions, to see any of these 3 folks. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We're going to turn now to an item from earlier in our agenda, agenda item 6.1 on the management strategy evaluation. The commissioners had noted the presentation and the recommendations previously when we heard from Dr. Hicks on that, but didn't bring to closure our next steps. So I'll summarize this and then see if any of the other commissioners want to weigh in. But we have discussed this a bit and are interested in getting a better understanding of some of the recommendations regarding development of a harvest strategy policy and potentially using the MSE to evaluate questions related to the FIS design. And the commissioners feel that we need more opportunity to discuss the relative priorities of some of the different recommendations there, as well as timelines for completion of some of the associated work products. And we thought the most efficient way to deal with that would be an intersessional discussion with the Secretariat staff, probably sometime in early March, or later in March is complicated, but if we can't do it in early March, then in April. So that would be our intent. So noting the recommendations from the Secretariat staff and in the presentation, but not taking any further action at this meeting. So let me see if any of the other commissioners want to add any clarification or additions there. Not seeing any. Okay. Very good. I think that'll conclude that, and then we can move, I think, Dave, directly into the conference board report. So we'll call on the chairs. Ms. Bacon.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Linda Benkin here to present the conference board report. I'm going to work from the executive summary, adding in a few actions that were taken by the conference board that don't show up in that executive summary, but mostly, and then happy to answer questions on the remainder of the report. So I'm starting on page 5 of our rather lengthy report.
So I'm here too.
Oh, great. Jim's here too. I got backup. So the 94th session of The conference board held in Anchorage, as you know, we had 62 members who attended the session from the two contracting parties. We provided you with all those names and their affiliations in the appendix. And Jim Lane and I opened the session, welcoming all who were in attendance, either in person or online. In relative to the FIS, the conference board acknowledged the importance of FIS data in the Bering Sea and recommended prioritizing a FIS survey in the Bering Sea in 2024 and regularly in years to follow or years to come. That vote passed with Canada with no objections, 3 abstentions, and the US unanimously in support. A few of the comments made in support of that motion is that the Bering Sea is a very dynamic area always, but with climate change, there are very unpredictable and fast changes occurring. That trends are often seen first with small fish or new year classes in that area that then affect all other areas, as well as this survey being an essential component of the Index of Abundance for the Bering Sea bycatch action recently approved by the Council. Moving to fishing period, season opening and closing dates. Not on the list there is that we had a split or different opening dates supported between the countries. The US coalesced around March 7th, although there were various members in support of opening dates between March 1st and March 15th. The first motion on the floor was for March 7th, and that passed, so we didn't vote on other dates. And Canada was unanimous in their support for March 1st. In support of those opening dates, there was recognition that this allowing as long a season as possible does provide maximum opportunity for fishermen, for processors, and for consumers to have access to fresh halibut. Discussion of tides, but also a caution that it would be logistically challenging for NOAA to have an opening prior to March 10th. Okay, then the CB recommended, going back to the executive summary, the CB recommended a change to the fishing period opening hour to 6 a.m. That passed Canada in favor 20, against 0, and 1 abstention. US unanimous in support of changing the opening time. CB members noted that allowing a full day facilitated access to markets, improved fishing efficiency, and fishing opportunity. On the closing date, the CB recommended a fishing period closing date on December 7th, with Canada in favor 19, against 0, and 0 abstaining. US in favor 22, against 1, and 3 abstentions. Relative to the closing time, the conference board also supported the closing time be moved from noon to 23:59 hours, with Canada in favor 16, against 0, 1 abstention. USA in favor 26, against 0, and 8 abstaining. In support of changing the closing time, again, the CB members noted that allowing a full day facilitated access to markets and improve fishing efficiency and opportunity. There was also discussion of the ability to fully retrieve gear in the event of any challenges encountered during that day of fishing. Moving to TCY recommendations, USA Conference Board members, US Conference Board members recommended the following TCEY mortality limits for the 2024 fishing period, provided in Table 2, which translate to the mortality estimates by sector as provided by the Secretariat in Appendix 3, and an SPR of 52%. Canada in favor 0, against 20, 0 abstaining. The US in favor 3, with 3 against and 1 abstention. I can probably skip reading through all those. You can see them all. Okay. I'll carry on. The Canadian Conference Board recommended TCUI mortality limits for the 2024 fishing period, representing a 10% reduction from 2023 TCUIs distributed, and that 10% reduction be distributed equally between contracting parties as provided in Table 3, which translate to the mortality estimates by sector as provided by the IPHC Secretariat, Appendix 3 in the table below, and an SPR of 54%. Canada in favor 22, against 0, 0 abstentions. US in favor 1, against 30, and 1 abstention. And again, those are included in the table there for your review. We had a few other actions that occurred that I wanted to mention. The first is the one noted here. The U.S. Conference Board recommended commissioners initiate a stakeholder-driven committee focused on identifying a formalized distribution strategy for Alaska regulatory areas and request secretarial support to be completed, not the support, but the committee's actions to be completed prior to AM100. Additional clarification around that committee and its charge. The committee would use as a starting point the biological distribution, the goal being to safeguard stakeholders for the potential shortfalls of the ad hoc, that should read, distribution methods and inconsistent weighting of socioeconomic needs, and to allow consideration to shift harvest distributions between U.S. regulatory areas.
Ms. Bacon, can I just interrupt with a question on that? When you refer to, or the conference board summary refers to secretariat support, what did you have in mind? Is that just some staff assistance?
Yes, staff assistance, and I think the opportunity to work or to request tables be run, different scenarios at times to fill in what numbers would be under different scenarios of TCY distribution. So if we have had a lot of talk of using a 3-year FIS average, possibly a weighted average, maybe looking at 5 years of the FIS and what those numbers would translate to if it's beyond our own capacity to come up with those numbers.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. So also, before we went into regulation, and this is on page 14, the conference board noted that 9 out of 14 comments provided via the website were related to the impact or noted the impact of the unconstrained, unguided sport fisheries in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A, and urged the commission to acknowledge these concerns and impacts and identify the appropriate management body to address these concerns. So whether that's the commission or the North Pacific Council. Okay, and then down to the IPHC fishery regulations. The conference board noted and recommended that the commission adopt fishery regulation proposal A3 Rev 1, updating and align log requirements for contracting parties in the IPHC fishery regulations. Canada in favor 1, against 0, abstained 16. US in favor 30, against 0, and 1 abstention. And then relative to the recreational sport fishing limits for IPHC regulatory areas, the CB noted and recommend that the commission adopt fishery regulations at Prop B1 Rev 1 that proposed IPHC regulation changes for the recreational charter recreational Pacific halibut fisheries in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A in order to achieve the charter Pacific halibut allocations under the North Pacific Fishery Management Council's Pacific Halibut Catch Sharing Plan. Canada abstained and US was unanimous. And then on the incidental catch, the conference board recommended that the commission acknowledge that ground fish, as it is referred to in the US fisheries, encounter and take Pacific halibut incidentally as bycatch. Pacific halibut bycatch minimization remains a high priority of conference board members, along with full and robust monitoring measures to quantify Pacific halibut removals and mortality. Canada's support was unanimous. USA in favor 31, against 0, and 4 abstentions. Which looks like a few more people than we actually had in the room voting. So I think that might have been 1 abstention. And I think that covers it. And I would just ask Jim if there's anything that I missed or anything you would like to add to that.
No, I think we covered it all that I can see. Thanks again for the help of the Secretariat on this week, not only in the conference board sessions, but also writing and editing the reports. It was much appreciated.
Yeah, certainly to echo that from myself and from the full conference board, the support of the Secretariat was amazing through the wee hours of the morning. Yeah, so happy to answer any questions on the report.
Okay, thank you to the chairs and to all the conference board members. Any questions? Paul?
Thanks very much, Linda, for the report and the summary of the way you presented it. I had a question about the opening times and just wondered if you could provide a bit more information about why March 7th and versus having something earlier, March 1st to the 4th. What was the rationale?
Through the chair, Commissioner Ryall, there was some discussion about which tides would be better and which timing allowed better opportunity for small boats and might stratify the fleet more, distribute the fleet more, with some difference of opinion about whether March 15th would be a better day for allowing that. Others who felt that the longest season possible was best for fishermen, best for providing fish onto the fresh market. So a wide range of opinion. And the first motion made was for March 7th. I think also people were paying attention to Noah's comment about logistical challenges before March 10th and ended up coalescing at March 7th with the most votes. We did not vote on any other date. That was the date that was on the table first. That passed. And so when Canada put March 1st on, we didn't vote as a US side because we'd already approved an opening date.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I think what I understood from Canada is that the tides are much better for Canada between the earlier dates of March 1st and 4th. And I understood that there would be some issues for NOAA to get licenses out in time for that period regardless. So I guess we'll have to take all that into account. Thanks for your answer.
Bob?
Linda, with regards to the day, was that discussed, the importance of a Friday or a Saturday opening? It has been an issue in the past. So.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Alverson, people did think that a Friday opening allowed better access to markets and that Friday was preferable. But there was some difference of opinion around that as well.
Thank you.
And the Boston Seafood Show was also discussed and how much of an effect that could have, whether different days allowed more promotion at that show. We had a pretty lengthy discussion, and March 7th is what ended up passing in the US, March 1st on the Canadian side.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Linda, for the presentation. Question on your recommendation for survey in Bering Sea. It says regularly in years to come. As you know, it's expensive to go in there. Did you guys knock down what regularly was and how it was defined? Is it every year? Can it be every third year? And you say, no.
Thank you through the chair, Commissioner DeGreef. So strong sense that the best scenario is an annual survey in the Bering Sea. We've heard from our staff that if there is a missed year, there's the opportunity to have confidence in the number using the space-time modeling, but that the best case scenario is an annual survey in the Bering Sea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Paul?
On the U.S. Recommendation about commissioners initiating a stakeholder-driven committee to look at distribution, I guess, in Alaskan regulatory areas. I'm just wondering, how would you take the social and economic needs into account, and where would you get the data or information to do that, I guess?
Thank you through the chair, Commissioner Ryall. I think the U.S. stakeholders will bring that information to the table, and we're not really asking you to appoint people to that committee. We will self-select. We will bring people together to do this work. We wanted you to know we were working on that, and then request your blessing so that the staff, the secretariat, makes information available as needed. But I think we wouldn't expect them to go out and do a socioeconomic analysis of different areas, anything at that level. We're not going to take up that much of their time, more to provide us and verify numbers of what distributions would look like under some of the scenarios that have been talked about at the MSAB for Alaska areas specifically.
All right, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Not seeing anything. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
report. And that brings us to our processor advisory panel report.
Thank you, commissioners. I'd like to start off by recognizing and thanking the Secretariat and the commissioners and staff for assisting us through this process. We had a great job, we had good help, and it's appreciated. So thank you. I would like to, if it's all right with the commissioners, go through the list. I think it's important to recognize the people that take the time out of their busy schedules to participate in this process. And so I'd like to, it's a fairly short list compared to the conference board, call out the members that were in attendance. So we had one additional new member, Canada Aero Trading, Liam Stockwell. An additional on the USA side, Wind and Tide LLC, doing business as Peninsula Seafoods, Jeff Granum, and another USA Alaska Fish Factory, Jeff Koinski. Association members, the Halibut Association North America, Peggy Parker, Pacific Seafood Processors Association, Nicole Kimball, and the reaccredited PAB members, from Canada, Cold Fish Company Incorporated, Gary Sugden, FAS Seafood Producers, Bruce Hale, Seven Seas Fish Company, Nick Harris, S&M Products, Carl Norman, my co-chair. On the USA side, 170 degrees west, Heather McCarty, Dana Bessiger Company, Susan Adair, E&E Seafoods, Kit Durnell. We were later joined for E&E Seafoods in person from Greg Enderlin from Yakutat. John Nagel Company, Mark Callahan, Northport Fisheries, Tyler Goodnight, OBI Seafoods, John Woodruff, Peter Pan Seafood, Steve Miner, Taku Fisheries, Huna Cold Storage, Tim James, Alaska Glacier Seafoods, virtual attendance was Jesse Keplinger, Pacific Seafoods, David Brindle, Ketchimack Bay Seafoods, William Sullivan. And then myself, Norm Pillen, as chair of the Seafood Producers Co-op. Thank you. So we'll go through mortality limits and TCEY recommendations. The PAB noted the question and answer period by Dr. Ian Stewart. Concerns were raised about the confidence in the statistic indicating that 40% of the 2012 year class is sexually mature, part of the spawning biomass. Obtaining certainty for this data point is challenging despite the improved methods like histological analysis. Historical maturity speed hasn't changed significantly with size and age. There's a high level of uncertainty in estimating future recruitment, especially with only the 2012 year class available, assuming a constant rate of maturity. The link between the size of spawning biomass and recruitment is considered weak. A proposal to change the harvest rate was discussed, but it was highlighted that it's linked to management policy objectives. The stock condition involves young Pacific halibut showing up in surveys indicating potential future fish availability. Natural variability and fishing effort are key components, with the latter having an overall decreased effect for the past 13 years, though recruitment remains a challenge. The discussion also touched on changes in size and age since the 1990s and uncertainty regarding reproductive threshold for recruitment, expressing the hope of winning the recruitment lottery. The PAB noted the question and answer session provided by Dr. Alan Hicks. Discussion, the PAB noted focusing on finalizing a formal harvest policy with ongoing efforts for commission approval and plans to present it at AM100. Emphasizing transparency and scientific grounding, the shift is toward SPR-based management. An intersessional stakeholder discussion before the AM101 is proposed for better preparedness for future comments, and the importance of involvement with the MSAB and MSC for strategic direction, suggesting the use of the MSC Explorer to understand implications of different management approaches. The PAB noted the question and answer session provided by Dr. Webster. In that discussion, the PAB noted that the discussion revolved around a proposal comment to combine NOAA Sablefish Survey and Pacific Halibut Survey in some aspect. Concerns about conducting FIS designs that are not revenue neutral, with the desire to conduct all necessary FIS based on scientific recommendations. Industry challenges were raised surrounding the FIS, including the need for stable funding, market dynamics affecting bidding, landing dates and times, and concerns about fish quality. The overall sentiment acknowledges the tough economic climate, but emphasizes the importance of maintaining a science-driven FIS design. The PAB discussed that additional advance of notice of IPHC survey trip would help accomplish a higher dock price. Discussion was made to propose a subcommittee to address the needs of increasing value on FIS landings. The PAB recommended that the Commission prioritize funding for a FIS in IPHC regulatory area 4, C, D, and E in 2024. Fishing period, season opening, and closing dates. The PAB noted that there were considerations about the timing of the fishing season, particularly starting post the Boston Seafood Show around March 10th to 12th. Suggestions were made for a season extending from 15th of March 2024 to 1st November 2024, with favorable tides on 15th to 18th of March in some parts of the convention area. However, concerns were raised about the election in November 2024. Opinions have varied on the ideal season duration, with some advocating for a later start and earlier closure, while others emphasized the benefits of a longer season for pricing and allowing fishermen ample time. The PAB recommended the following fishing periods for 2024. Opening March 15th and a closing of November 15th. The PAB recommended the following fishing period, opening closing times of day for 2024. Opening time, and this was unanimous, opening time of 0600 and closing at 11:59 on the 15th and closing at 11:59 on the 15th of November. IPHC fishing regulations. The PAB noted fishery regulation proposal Prop 3 A3 to update and align logs requirements for contracting parties in the IPHC fishing regulation, but did not take action. Contracting party fishery regulation proposals, recreational sport fishing, Pacific halibut, IPHC regulatory areas 2C, 3A, 3B, 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, 4E, charter management measures in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. The PAB noted fishery regulation, IPHC 2024 AM100 Proposition B1 that proposed IPHC regulation changes for charter recreational halibut fisheries in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A in order to achieve the charter halibut allocation under the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council's Pacific Halibut Catch Sharing Plan, but not take any action. The PAB noted fishery regulation Prop B2 that aimed to modify IPHC fishery regulations, Section 5, mortality and fishery limits, and Section 6, in-season actions, reflective of changes to the catch sharing plan that allocates the IPHC regulatory area to a Pacific catch limit, but did not take action. Other stakeholder fishery regulation proposals. The PAB noted and recommend that the Commission adopt fishery regulation proposal Prop C1 that proposed amendments to include a TCEY floor in IPHC regulatory area 2A. IPHC fishery regulation, recreational sport fishing, Pacific halibut. The PAB noted fishery regulation proposal Prop C2 that proposed adding flexibility to existing recreational sport Pacific halibut fishing regulations Alaska and to provide increased flexibility for the consumption of Pacific halibut on board of recreational vessels, but not take any action. Election of chairperson and vice chair. In accordance with Appendix 4, Section 3 of the IPHC Rules of Procedure, PAB noted the requirement to elect a Canadian chairperson of the PAB. The next biennium, given the current term of Mr. Carl Norman expires at the end of the PAB 029 meeting. PAB's annual meeting shall be convened by the PAB chairperson and vice chair, one representing each country. Officers are elected for 2 years term. The PAB called for nominations for the position of Canadian chairperson of the PAB for the next biennium or until a replacement is elected. Mr. Bruce Hale was nominated, seconded, and elected as Canadian chairperson. Yeah. Probably everybody's hanging on this, and I went past this page, but the TCEY recommendations. A lot of conversation about this. A lot of this probably, as per usual, probably involved the most discussion. The PAB, at the end of the day, the vote, the PAB recommended the following TCEY mortality limits for the 2024 fishing period as provided in Table 3. So, Processors Advisory Board recommend the TCEY mortality limits at Area 2A at 1.65 million pounds, Area 2B 6.31 million pounds, Area 2C at 5.67, 3A 11.36, 3B at 3.41, 4A 1.63, 4B 1.28, 4C, D, and E at 3.66 for a total of 34.97 million pounds. IPHC Secretariat Fishing Regulation Proposals, mortality fishery limits. The PAB noted and recommended the Commission adopt fishery regulation proposal Prop A1 with the additional mortality limits for each contracting party by sector as detailed in Section 5.3, but also include all mortality, subsistence, bycatch, and non-guided sport and annual summary framework table. The PAB noted and recommended that the Commission adopt fishery regulation proposal Prop A2 specified fishing periods for the commercial Pacific halibut fishery. See section 4 for summary discussions and recommendations. 8. Yep. The PAB welcomed the participation of the chairperson, vice chairperson of the commission who attended the session to provide information on their TCY advice to the PAB and clarifications on the recent rules of procedure changes, and the letter to the PAB dated 18th December 2023 provided in Appendix 4. The PAB noted the rationale provided by the chairperson and vice chair of the commission, and that should issues arise regarding PAB membership numbers, that they would be dealt with at that time. The PAB noted their concern about many potential impacts of the changes to the term of reference on the PAB. That completes the report.
Okay, thank you, Norm and Carl. Commissioners, any questions? Neil?
Thank you for the report. Just a question of clarification. So I'm reading the summary page, executive summary, and the TCEY recommendations. So it says that the recommendation, it reads that it failed in Canada but passed in the US, but it reads as a recommendation of PAB as a whole. So is there a typo there, or can you explain? So it reads that PAB recommended, but then it follows in italics that Canada was in favor 2 and against 3. USA in favor 13 against 1.
Yes, so this was not a unanimous vote. Canada were recorded 2 in favor, 3 against, and unanimous, and in favor 13 on the US side and 1 against 1.
But just for clarification, we only held it as one vote. We didn't do a separate vote between the two, Canadian and the US side.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So as I understand it, then this is essentially a motion that passed on the US but failed on the Canadian side.
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Paul?
Thanks very much for the report, Norm. Recommendation, I guess it's 1. The PAB recommended the commission prioritize funding for this in the IPHC regulatory area for CD&E in 2024. There are other considerations for other pieces. So are you saying this is the top priority?
I think that was felt to be the case around the room as a consensus, that I think most of industry recognizes that the Bering Sea is the nursery ground for the entire resource, and that, there's a lot of challenges out there right now with trawl bycatch and all the things that are going on. So, yeah.
I think also it was noted due to the impeding not having that recent fish survey done in those areas is being used as a legal case against the bycatch issue currently.
Okay, thanks, Norm. Carl?
Any other questions? Okay, thanks to the chairs and to the PAB members. Go ahead.
So I have a question for Linda that I forgot to raise, if she could come back up.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Ms. Benkin.
So I was wondering if there was any discussion with regards to the unguided 2 fish bag limit versus what's going on with the catch share plan for in 3A and 3 and 2C. I've heard some dialogue about addressing that. that maybe it needs to be deferred to the North Pacific Council or not? Just wondering what type of discussion you may have had in the conference board.
Yeah, through the chair, Commissioner Alverson, on page 14 of our report, there is paragraph 42, the USACB noted that 9 out of 14 comments provided via the website were related to the impact of the unconstrained, unguided sport fishery in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A, and urged the commission to acknowledge these concerns and identify the appropriate management body to address these concerns. And we did have a conversation of the impact of that change of behavior on the cat sharing plans, as well as on the user groups that do have an allocation. We didn't get into any specifics on the record of what approaches might address those concerns, because it is a domestic issue and we thought it should be taken up by the domestic parties. But we were looking for clarification on that, of whether, since bag limits are the purview of the IPHC, if this issue might be addressed by the IPHC or if it's considered an allocation issue and should be taken to the North Pacific Council. And just noted that this issue has been brought up multiple times here at the IPHC. It's been brought up at the council, and each place people go, they're told to go to the other place. And that's not helping anybody move forward with a strategy. So looking for the IPHC to offer some clarity and to take this up with the council and identify a path forward that addresses the concerns we're hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, I think that brings us to revisiting regulatory proposals for 2024. I think your mic is on, Basha.
Testing, testing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as described on Tuesday, we have 7 regulatory proposals on the table for the Commission. Today, we would like to take action on as many of these proposals as we can in order to streamline the agenda for tomorrow, where we can focus on mortality and fishery limits. I already provided a description, and each proposal proponent had the opportunity to speak on behalf of each proposal. So I will be just providing today a brief summary and reminder of what each proposal is about, but I will be able to also answer any additional questions that might be arising. I will be also showing an appendix for each of these proposals in order to have, for the record, full clarity on the proposed regulatory language should the proposal be adopted. So for proposal A1, as a reminder, this proposal is a framework for mortality and fishery limits within the IPHC fishery regulation sections 5. For now, we would like to ask the Commission to take a decision on the framework itself, not the actual limit. Decision on mortality limits is typically postponed to Friday of the annual meeting. So over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So if I understand the Secretariat recommendation on that, we would just defer action until tomorrow, correct?
We would just adopt the framework and defer the decision on the actual limit.
Adopt the framework. All right. I think we can proceed with that. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I believe in front of us is Appendix A, and which is a format, I think, intended for this.
Correct.
And I would move that we adopt that for tomorrow's action.
Is there a second? Peter? Seconded by Commissioner DeGrief. Any discussion or questions? Is there any objection? Okay, the framework is adopted.
Thank you. Moving to proposal A2. This proposal specifies the directed commercial fishing periods in IPHC fishery regulations section 9. The Secretary proposes here that the commercial fishing periods for all IPHC regulatory areas are set with stakeholders' input provided through Conference Board and Processor Advisory Board. If we scroll to the appendix of this proposal, typically the IPHC provides in this proposal a framework for just the days, but I will note that there were also a number of recommendations from the Conference Board and Processor Advisory Board also on the hour of the season opening and closing. So I will just note that this could be also adopted as a part of this proposal. So at this time, we can move into adopting both the framework and should the Commission wish also the actual season dates.
Okay, I suspect we'll only be adopting the framework now, but let's see if we have a motion. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I make a motion that we adopt the text but fill in the important parts tomorrow.
Is there a second? Commissioner Alderson seconds. Any discussion on that? Any objection? Okay, the framework is adopted. Oh, Mr. Alderson.
Basha, with regards to the, I think it's 36-hour or something like that, openings for off of Newport for the directed halibut fishery down there, do we need to approve any dates, or is that already done with National Marine Fisheries Services coordinating with the Pacific Council?
Thank you, Commissioner Albertson. To the chair. So with the adopted and implemented transition of management in IPHC Regulatory Area 2A, there is no need for the Commission to make specific action on IPHC Regulatory Area 2A. I'll just note that the 2A within the Council's recommendation will have to set the dates within the commercial fishing period set by the Commission.
Okay, on to A3.
Thank you. Can we please bring proposal A3 to the screen? So proposal A3, this proposal includes several components aimed to update and align log requirements. I will note that this proposal we have upon advice from policy advisors from NOAA Fisheries, this proposal have been revised this morning. This revision reflects better the Secretariat's intention to make submission of logs in the United States within 30 days of season closure a strong advisory statement. If the Commission would like to make changes to different effect, we would like to defer this component of the proposal and suggest that we continue the discussions with policy advisors and stakeholders how to accommodate more efficiently the data transfer to the Commission post-season. And if we move to appendix, here's the, can you please scroll down so I verify it's the, yes. So this is the revised this morning proposal A3 Rev 1.
So Dr. Hutchsack, I wonder if you could clarify the revision. This seems like a fairly substantive change to go from a mandatory logbook requirement to something less. So could you elaborate on that a bit, please?
Yes, this change prioritizes our relationship with the stakeholders, and we would not like to open potential prosecution within the sector. We would like to have the ability to strongly recommend that the logbooks are submitted to the Commission.
Okay, and if I heard you correctly, you were suggesting that if the Commission is not inclined to do that, that we defer action on this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And do we not have the option to, if the Commission so chooses, to approve the original proposal with the mandatory logbook requirement?
That potentially opens enforcement for those logbooks. Although we have had discussion with NOAA Fisheries, and there could be a specific guidance for that would be provided to the NOAA Fisheries enforcement, and we would seek that from NOAA enforcement.
I'm not sure I follow what that specific guidance would be.
It would be a guidance regarding how this should be enforced in a way that we would not like to. We would like this to be more of an advisory from the enforcement instead of this being fully related to tickets and potential legal actions.
Commissioner Albertson.
Basha, if we adopt this, does it change the current requirement at the end of the season that we are required to the boat owners and masters are supposed to file their logbooks? Does it change it to not shall, but something else that is not a requirement?
Under current regulations, the IPHC data that should be submitted to the IPHC has to be available to the Commission upon request. If we have not received a given logbook by the end of the season, we do send, per that section of the regulation, a prompt to the vessel owners to submit that logs after a season. However, this is a very burdensome and not very efficient process. That's why that proposed change that would encourage vessels to send these logbooks directly after the season ends to the IPHC for more efficient data processing post-season. I would just note this applies to a very small amount of logs that have not been collected by the Commission through IPHC representatives available at the offload site, because we do have our fisheries data specialist available at the majority of offload site for most of the commercial fishing period.
Mr. Chair, I think that most of the masters and vessel owners I talk to presume that it's required that they send in that logbook. I don't think they think it's an option. And that's one problem I'm having with this, is that it's sort of an option to send it in rather than a shall. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking we either need to step back or if we want to move forward, my recommendation is that this should be a requirement that the logbooks come in.
So Dr. Hunchsack, if I'm following this correctly, it sounds like we've got a few different options here. We can adopt the proposal as it was originally made with a mandatory requirement for the logbooks. We could adopt the modified proposal where it is optional. We could defer action on this, which I presume includes potentially deferring action until tomorrow or deferring action indefinitely. Do I have that correct?
So I will just note that for submission of this log, the option for the Commission to prompt the vessel owners to submit those logs will be still in the regulation. So we'll still have that option, even if it's not shall, it's just should. And we suggest also that the another option is just to adopt the proposal without this one component. That would be that recommendation. That all the other components are still fully supported, and that there were no other revisions to that proposal.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So given the confusion over this, commissioners, and the fact that we will be taking action on some regulatory proposals tomorrow, I think I'm going to suggest we just hold on this one and see if tomorrow we have a clear path forward. Is that seeing some nodding heads? Okay, that's where we are. So let's move to B1, please.
Thank you. Proposal B1, if we could bring it to the screen, the appendix. Proposal B1 is a framework for setting charter management measures in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. As a reminder, this decision will be only on the framework for setting the management measures for the charter sector, and the actual measures will be defined as the mortality limits are set by the Commission.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt the framework for charter management measures?
I so move.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Yamada. Do we have a second? Commissioner DeGrief seconds. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Okay, the framework is adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Proposal B2, if we could bring it on the screen. Proposal B2 makes clarifying modifications to the IPHC fishery regulations that are reflective of the recent changes to the catch sharing plan that allocates a Pacific halibut resource in IPHC regulatory area 2A. Can we just scroll a little bit lower to see the footnote? Thank you. And the section in season action that should be visible on the screen.
Okay, so Dr. Hutchinsack, is the action again to adopt the framework?
No, this is actual text.
Okay, so
That would be making that clarifying change. So without that text, the Pacific Council recommendation would not align with IPHC regulations.
okay, and just procedurally doing that now versus tomorrow when we adopt the catch limits, that's not an issue to adopt this now.
Now, this proposal only notes that there might be a minor changes between allocations between the recreational sectors in Washington, Oregon, and California, but it does not specify any values. It's just the footnote in the table, as well as addition to the section 6 that makes that clarification.
Okay, very good, thank you. So I guess we are looking for a motion to adopt the in-season actions for Area 2A.
I so move.
Commissioner Yamada, is there a second? Commissioner Ryall, any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Ellerson.
So I'm confused with the wording on this, that in regulatory 2A, NOAA may take in-season action to reallocate their recreational fishery limits between Washington, Oregon, and California. Is this following advice from the Pacific Council, or is this suggested that NOAA can do this unilaterally? I don't recall seeing this language prior to this.
This is related to, again, a Pacific Council action, and I believe there are very specific rules set how this could be reallocated between each state. There are specific dates within the guidance of the council at which point this reallocation could occur, and at what if there are specific requirements for that. I don't think the Frank Lockhart, the 2A advisor, is here. We have.
So does this bring us into a situation where if the Pacific Council went through a process and did something, then NOAA could approve that? Okay.
It looks like we have a couple of state agency representatives who may be able to help
Thank
to
you.
sort this out.
Thank you. Through
Please.
Commissioner Alverson, this is something that the council discussed in November and actually starting back in June. And it's a way to just provide some flexibility between the three states to, at some point in the season, if one state isn't going to take their allocation, that it can be shared and spread. This was addressing a conversation we had through the council about increasing allocations or using this flexible approach. So this covers that.
I remember that discussion now. I just didn't align it with the wording here. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So just a reminder where we are. We have a motion that has been made and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Is there any objection to the motion? Okay, that motion passes.
Thank you, Chair. Moving to proposal C1, If we could bring it on the screen, this is the first of the stakeholder proposals. This proposal is providing for minimum TCY for IPHC regulatory area 2A of 1.65 million pounds. I will note that this proposal can be also considered as a part of discussion mortality limits on Friday because it specifically refers to the table that is part of the mortality and fishery limits framework that is normally scheduled for Friday.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not aware of any action the commission intends to take on this, but I did want to speak to it. We had some of this discussion at the time. The presenter, TJ Green, presented the proposal and we had some back and forth on it. The United States government recognizes our trust responsibility to the 13 treaty tribes in Area 2A that depend upon Pacific halibut. The U.S. commissioners have supported a 1.65 million pound allocation to Area 2A consistently since 2019, and we still do. It reflects the needs of West Coast halibut users with minimal impact on the larger halibut biomass to the north, and it remains a small fraction of the Region 2 allocation. Stock assessment experts with the Secretariat have affirmed, including at this meeting, that a higher TCEY for Area 2A than what may be indicated by the distribution of the stock per the Fishery Independent Setline Survey will not create a conservation concern. Historically, variable TCEY allocations and declines below a certain threshold in fishery limits from year to year created significant uncertainty and hardship for the 13 treaty halibut tribes and 3 coastal states that are dependent on the halibut fisheries in Area 2A. The U.S. commissioners still favor 1.65 million pounds for Area 2A when stock conditions allow it. It's clear that a lot of thought and hard discussion went into arriving at that number. But as I stated at last year's annual meeting when we faced a very similar regulatory proposal, I'm concerned that trying to have 1.65 million set in regulations as a fixed minimum, a floor, could create real problems for the commission. The commission's top obligation, of course, is to ensure sustainability of the halibut resource for the long term. And we have to be able to respond to changes in abundance. And if the abundance decreases, we have to be prepared to set lower allocations to allow the stock to recover and rebuild. And if Area 2A were to get a regulatory floor, and perhaps other regulatory areas may want their own floors involving much larger proportions of coastwide halibut stock, that could impede the commission's flexibility in responding to variability in stock conditions. So again, the U.S. commissioners will continue to consider the need for 1.65 million pounds in Area 2A via the IPHC annual decision-making process, and do so either in annual or multi-year agreements between the U.S. and Canada. We continue to view 1.6 million pounds as a very important need for Area 2A, but always with that caveat that under certain stock conditions, we may need to consider a different TCEY level for Area 2A. So although we have some reservations about the regulatory proposal, again, we remain strongly supportive of that number and will continue to advocate for it. I don't think we have any other action on this proposal, so I think we can move on to C2.
Thank you, Chair. Proposal C2 increases flexibility for onboard consumption of recreationally caught Pacific halibut in Alaska. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. So on C2, I'm aware of some discussion about this and the complexities of enforcement of the different components that are included here, and in particular, the difficulty in enforcing bag or possession limits. So I'm not aware of any action commissioners wish to take on this. Just looking to see if there is any. No, not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This concludes the regulatory session today, and we'll get back to remaining proposals tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the close of our agenda today. Let me turn to Dr. Wilson and see if there are any administrative announcements or anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We have wrapping up the agenda for today, which means that we would reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And that would be to go through the final decision-making components that are outstanding, including the decisions related to the various fishery regulation proposals, discussion about the rules of procedure, the 3-year meeting calendar, and then the election of the chairperson and vice-chairperson. And that would wrap us up. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, very good. Not seeing anything else. So we are adjourned for the day. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. I'm hearing people asking about public comment. We did not have a public comment session posted on our meeting agenda. Well, that's awkward, isn't it? Let's stand down for just a second, please. Okay, apologies for the confusion on that. We did not have a public comment period on the agenda and still don't, but you know, we want to hear what people have to say. So we can go ahead and work through that list, and we'll just ask people to keep it a little concise. Dr. Wilson, do you have the list? Momentarily. Okay, looks like we have Linda Benkin and Malcolm. I guess you guys are coming up together. Is that right? Okay.
Yep. Thank you for taking the public comment, even though it wasn't on the agenda. My name is Malcolm Milne. I'm with the North Pacific Fisheries Association, and I'm speaking here with Linda Benkin with the Alaska Longline Fisheries Association. And we were up here today just to request that you take serious consideration into the Bering Sea survey. And I understand you understand the importance of it, but we just wanted to highlight the importance to the stakeholders of that survey take place this year for a variety of reasons, which I think have already been enumerated. So in the essence of time and your respect for you, I won't go through them all right now, but I appreciate that and highlight that that is a stakeholder request. Thank you.
And that Linda Benkin just seconding that. And I know there was quite a large group that met today to identify the importance of that survey. We talked about all coming up. Didn't want to bog you down, but really appreciate you hearing us that this is incredibly important. There's been a huge amount of work put into managing catch and bycatch in a fair way in the Bering Sea, and this survey is crucial to that action and to ensuring that we are successful in reducing bycatch in the Bering Sea. And I know that's important to everyone involved in this process. So ask that that be a priority to fund the survey in the Bering Sea, all areas for 2024, and to keep it a high priority going forward.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you. Next is Jeff Kaufman.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Kaufman. I'm from St. Paul Island, and I'm here to talk to you about the 2024 FIS in Area 4 this season.
And I'm Heather McCarty. I work with Jeff at Central Bering Sea Fishermen's Association. Same subject.
As you know, the Conference Board passed a motion stressing the importance and recognizing the need for prioritization of an Area 4 FIST survey in 2024 and in future years. And so I've got a lot to say about this. I think it's just critically important. So I have some bullet points here, and I'll kind of go down through them. First of all, the Bering Sea represents an IPHC regulatory area undergoing the most rapid change in the ecosystem and distribution of commercially important species. The SRB recommended that the Secretariat prioritize sampling in this area to monitor for potential changes in the halibut distribution and biology. Historically, there's been an important amount of halibut biomass on the shelf edge slope, an area that is not well surveyed by the NOAA Fishery Trawl Survey and therefore requiring direct sampling by the FIS. There's been very little commercial effort on the edge break in Area 4C, in 4D. So the IPHC doesn't get as much commercial data as in some other areas. The NIMS Trawl Survey is helpful and covers a large area of the BSAI, but it's important to have data from the edge and island stations to have more comprehensive coverage and data to work with. A true FIS in Area 4 is necessary for calculating stock distribution and area allocations. Area 4 is an area with impactful allocations between sectors, especially when the TCY is small. Sector splits and reduced bycatch limits become very difficult to achieve without appropriate data, and the ABM program must have FIS data as one of its indices of abundance. Area 4 is a source that feeds other regulatory areas in their movement from west to east, and the Bering Sea is known as a net emigrator of halibut, so understanding what is happening in the Bering Sea is important to all IPHC regulatory areas. It's important to remember also that the ABM action requires both the EBS Trawl Survey and the FIS to calculate bycatch limits annually. And then just a couple last bullets to wrap up here. Many stakeholders, including ourselves, worked for more than 10 years advocating for abundance-based bycatch management of halibut and reductions of halibut bycatch in the trawl sector in Alaska. Commissioners past and present have desired to see bycatch reductions. The conference board, the PAB, and many others have in this process been asking for many, many years for bycatch reductions and to do better on bycatch. And I think that we've achieved that through this ABM action. And it's going to benefit everybody. And so that is just really, really important. We poured over 10 years of resources into that, asking for these reductions for a long time. And we don't think that that should be compromised to save a little bit of money. And then just lastly, to minimize the cost of these optional FIS surveys, CBSV has offered to buy Area 4 CDE survey halibut or to tender the survey halibut from St. Paul to Dutch Harbor or Akutan. This will help reduce the cost and time of running each delivery to Akutan or Dutch Harbor in the Aleutian chain. And we may also be able to provide ice for the vessel survey. And lastly, CBSV is considering bidding on the 4CDE FIS to help the cost.
Thank you, Jeff. What Jeff said, plus, the revenue neutral approach to this function of IPHC seems to be compromised by the current conditions in the market and the cost of surveys. And while that is a real consideration, we hope that you prioritize the scientific need for this survey rather than prioritizing sticking to the revenue neutral. I know that you're considering it, so we're just encouraging you to do it from that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, and just lastly, if I could just add to that, so we would basically need the block design plus option 4, which covers 4A and 4B, as well as option 9, which covers 4C and E, and the total cost of surveying both areas is $450,000 combined.
Okay, thank you both. Any questions? Commissioner Yamato.
Yeah, I agree with the need. I think a lot of the issues comes up with trying to find bids for that area. And I really appreciate your trying to work at that, making it more feasible for vessels to make it out there and make it, economically feasible for them to participate in. And yeah, we're open to any ideas, how we can make bids for that area more attractive. That is a stumbling block that I think even if we had the funds and definitely we have at least from my perspective, the interest to do it. We may be limited by not having vessels being able to go out there, but I appreciate, the offer that would help us achieve that objective. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just ask along the same vein, appreciating your offer to kind of assist with some of the logistics, ice processing, et cetera. I'm wondering how that would factor in if that's not built into a bid that you submit, if you're essentially providing assistance to another bidder. Have you thought that through?
Yeah, rather than assistance to the other bidder, I was looking at it more as assistance to the IPHC, maybe. And not so much for the vessel, but just as a cost savings, because if you're fishing around St. Matthew or on the 4D edge or around the Pribilof Island stations, that's a huge area and it takes weeks to survey the whole thing. And so you would have to make multiple trips potentially to Dutch Harbor Akutan from the fishing grounds. And that takes a lot of days as well as a lot of fuel, a lot of food and other things. And so since they'll be working around the island stations anyway, we have a buying operation there, CBSFA does, and we would, I guess, work with the commission on that buying part of it, as well as on the survey vessel and providing ice and potentially buying fish, or if you prefer us to just tender it down to Akutan for you. So we're kind of open and we're willing to work with the IPHC however possible to make this happen, and trying to cut costs where we can. And we have some really nice boats. We did do a charter for the IPHC many years ago now. And that went really good. And so we've got the platform, we've got the gear, we've got the location, we've got the crew. And so it's a little bit of foregone revenue maybe from fishing and other fisheries. But again, the importance of this too, I think everybody in this room makes us feel like we should do something a little bit more.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, and encourage you to keep the dialogue open with Secretariat staff on those logistics. Okay, thanks much. Simeon, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Just as a last note, you mentioned the need for 4A and B, as well as 4C D and E. Can you explain the need for 4A and B in the indices as well?
Yeah, so as you know, there's two indices, and one is the Eastern Bering Sea Trawl Survey, and the other one is the Set Line Survey. And that Set Line Survey that's used in the index is the survey from 4A, 4B, and 4C D and E. So basically, I'd have a fifth survey in the Bering Sea to complement that indice that's used for setting bycatch limits.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's right.
Okay. Thanks. Simeon, I saw your hand. We're going to just go through the list in order, and I'll catch you at the end, if that's all right. So next we have Nels Evans.
Hi, I am Nels Evans, Executive Director of Petersburg Vessel Owners. I represent commercial fishermen that harvest halibut in areas 2, 3, and 4. The IPHC recognizes the Pacific halibut stock as a coastwide stock and manages it as such. Because it is managed as a coastwide stock, the science and surveys used to manage the stock also need to represent the whole coast. By current disproportionate performance in the FIS surveys in areas 2 and 3 over areas 4, due largely to current financial circumstances, we are giving ourselves information on where the halibut are going, but not where they are coming from. It is commonly understood that Pacific halibut stocks migrate from west to east, with the Bering Sea as a nursery ground for the stock. The Eastern Bering Sea Trawl Survey is a very important tool to gain information on those immature halibut before they start biting the hook. But by not performing the FIS survey regularly in the BSAI, we are unable to capture as clear of survey data as those fish grow, moving from the trawl survey to the FIS survey. It is important to recognize that there are two legs to the survey in the BSAI, and we need both of them to remain standing, particularly in an area that is developmentally important to the halibut stock as a whole, as well as shown to have high levels of environmental volatility. These concerns are only magnified in conditions like we see before us today, with high stock uncertainty and rapid environmental change. We need to be able to see the whole picture of what is going on through the FIS survey. In closing, I want to reiterate that the FIS survey needs to remain its coast-wide representation, and to find ways to maintain proper coverage through the FIS survey in the BSAI. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for your comment. Any questions? Not seeing any. Thanks. Peggy Parker.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, for asking for our input on this. I appreciate changing the agenda to accommodate us. I wanted to second everything that you've heard so far and just briefly add that I think we have allies on the Hill in DC for funding. I know that hasn't come yet, but when we went back there just a little over a month ago, everyone asked immediately what it was for, and we said a survey. Fisheries survey, of course we will. We'll do everything we can to support that. So with this lawsuit that's challenging the rule, Hannah has voted to become an intervener, join this effort to fight that and support the industry's 10 years of, and the National Marine Fisheries Service's 10 years of work on this, the industry's 10 years of work on it. It is the abundance-based model, and abundance-based management is central to fisheries management. And it wasn't happening with bycatch, and it is now for halibut. So pretty darn important for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Any questions? Okay, thanks. Brian Ritchie.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity for public testimony. I think it's important, so I want to commend you all for that. My name is Brian Ritchie. I'm representing Alaska Charter Association and the Homer Charter Association, and I'm a stakeholder in 3A. I want to speak today in support of the conference board motion recommending the creation of a stakeholder-driven committee with the goal of establishing a formalized distribution strategy for Alaskan regulatory areas. I really believe that the role of management is to monitor and protect the resource, but also to protect the stakeholders that depend on harvesting, marketing, and selling that resource. We've heard a lot about the conditions of this process in this meeting, or at least we talked about it a lot at the conference board, and there's been some frustrations expressed. And the conditions of this process are partly a product of the incentives that we are providing within it and that we have provided within it. When we continually make or advocate for ad hoc distributive policies that are not reflective of the stock status or distribution, we incentivize stakeholders, those stakeholders that we're supposed to be protecting, to capitalize into fisheries and business models we know are likely unsustainable, and we incentivize them to expect this process to continue a practice of weighting the socioeconomic needs of some regions over the distribution or biology of the stock. To me, that seems like it's a dangerous precedent to set, and I'm not sure that ultimately it's good management or policy. I think that in this process we can do better, and I think that we can better serve the stakeholders that we're supposed to be protecting. I really think that the stakeholders here deserve a chance to be the stewards of the resources and the stewards of the businesses that they have, and I think that the best way to do that is to establish a committee and to let stakeholders have a say in a distribution policy in Alaskan waters. It would help us a lot, and I think it's the right thing to do in the long run. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Any questions? I do have one. I wonder if you could clarify, why is commission action necessary? If this is a stakeholder committee, why couldn't stakeholders get together and come up with something and then present it to the commission?
Thank you. I think that's a good question. Hopefully there would be, secretariat support would be very, very helpful, obviously, for stakeholders to understand this, maybe to understand the implications of different options that they might see. Also, I think that it's important that it be a formalized process, that it be something that there's some pressure to follow when you guys make the hard decisions. And I'm not saying that this has to be a purely prescriptive process that you all need to adhere to, but maybe some guidelines, and you can make adjustments from there based on the socioeconomic needs that we hear from groups like the conference board.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, our last person wishing to testify is Simeon Swetzoff.
Good afternoon there, commissioners, members of the public, and I'm here representing myself. I'm a commercial halibut fisherman from St. Paul Island, and here to speak in support of having surveys done out in 4C D&E. For many years, I've been fishing out now for 40 years out of the 100 years, so I'm giving myself some kudos on that. And we come here year after year after year, and at the end of the meeting, we have a resolution coming to you guys on reduction of bycatch out in the Bering Sea. And so we went to the North Pacific Fishery Management Council. I got up and testified about reduction of bycatch in the Bering Sea. We got that. It comes out to be ABM. So, you guys asked for something to be done. We did it. We went to the North Pacific Fishery Management Council, and we got it all done as good as it can possibly be right now, I'm guessing. And so, to hear all the discussion that's taking place with doing surveys out there, it just makes me think, what's happening here? Why is it so difficult for us to get a survey done? We're Americans here. We fish out in the Bering Sea. It's like the richest ocean in the world, practically. That's where most of all the fish is caught for pollock, Amendment 80 bottom fish, halibut, salmon, crab. Climate change is kicking our butt now, and then we come here and we're trying to be fair. So we would really appreciate it if you guys would sit down and get together and say, okay, yeah, we'll see what they're doing, and if you don't, then it would be, all the work we did is for naught. So I'm forcing your hand to say, okay, we're going to do the surveys. So we put the ball in your court now, and I'd appreciate it if you would do the survey. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Any questions? Oh, not seeing any. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now I think we're at the end of the agenda. Thank you all. Sorry about the confusion with the comment period. We are adjourned until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.